Yeah, SDG 11 was formulated to track progress in cities and human settlements across 15 indicators, and cities monitoring has taken a central place in post 15 development agendas, particularly SDGs and the NUAs. Monitoring progress, development of tools and methodologies for like a progresses, okay, and these are the sets of agencies you can see over here, who are like working for developing these tools and methodologies, right? So UN Habitat, like UNESCO is there, UN Environment is there, UNFPA, WHO, UNISDR, UNODC, like UNSD, together they are contributing for multiple things, like WHO decides for like a air quality index, and they create like a guidelines, what should be the minimal acceptable level and all of those kind of things. And similarly, all of these agencies and many others, not just like this is not an exhaustive list, many other agencies, they are contributing in their own ways through consultative processes you see over here. So there are UN's regional commissions, specialized institutions, research institutions, other NGOs, civic agencies, right? They are all contributing, other partners to like create like these frameworks and these methods and reports and everything, so that like a collective and wholesome approach of SDG 11 can be taken forward. Yeah, and this like it requires use of alternative methods of data generation also, so that you have like sources for credible data, right? So many goal 11 indicators require collection at city level, like we have discussed earlier, like how do you frame your policies, how do you make decisions, how much of quantum of effort is needed at what place, how do you know? Okay, for that definitely you need that feedback, that data collection, right? So unless and until that data comes to you, okay, you may not be in a like a rightful like a position to frame your policies, right? So that's why like this data is very crucial for generating for creating like a policies and frameworks. Yeah, so routine data collection mechanisms such as censuses, household surveys, right? Examples include indicators on public transport. Yeah, so multiple depending upon what you want to check, you can create your own methods, tools and methodologies to gather the data. Like census, if you see, is a like a decadal like a exercise where pan Indian like a data is collected, right, for like anything and everything. So whatever is going on in the like in the country, you get like that information through this like a data, right? And then you make your like a policies and frameworks and decisions based on this. Earth observations for human settlements monitoring. So this is also one of the like methods where observations related to like the whole earth is actually like a made. So earth observations, so for human settlement monitoring. So how do you do that? Okay, how do you monitor how much of like a land, how much of human settlements and habitat is connected with the electrical like a supplies and has road network and all of these things. It's very treacherous like a job to like a monitor from far away places across the whole world. Okay, so there are means and methods through which one can like observe it. So earth observation actually refers to monitoring the planet using sensors in and around the globe, in and around the earth. The Group of Earth Observation GEO is an intergovernmental partnership that provides open access to more than 400 million open EU data and information resources that are relevant for SDGs, monitoring, research, policy, decision making, etc. Yeah, because we are emphasizing on like a data collection. So how do you go for it? Because if you start monitoring it manually, it is next to impossible job to like measure each and every aspect to its full accuracy, right? It may take a very long time, plus there will be a lot of errors, right? There may be some limitations that the reporting agencies could not reach to this place, that place, etc. So there will be a lot of errors and loopholes and gaps, right? So you do not want that. So this is where like this comes to the rescue. The GU work program supports global SDG monitoring through the Earth observation in service of a 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Specific work on SDG 11 includes assessing land use efficiency, monitoring public spaces, climate mitigation and adaptation, disaster risk reduction. Yeah. So if you see, offering greater use of freely available satellite imagery across each phase of the disaster cycle for preparedness and prevention, as well as response and recovery. Because if something goes wrong, like for example earthquake, or maybe wildfires, or maybe flooding, etc., etc., how do you know exact, these things? So from satellites, you can definitely zoom to any place you want and gather a real time data. Yeah. Spatial micro simulation urban metabolism, SMUM, tool for modeling policy impacts. Well, what is it? Urban metabolism is a way of looking at cities and all resources that flow within their complex networks, material flows, of interlocked social and physical infrastructure. It conceptualizes a city as living superorganism. We have been discussing the city as an organism, in which there are continuous flows of inputs and outputs, and helps in study of the patterns of movements of matter and energy. This supports cities in identifying opportunities for sustainable resource management and can be linked with infrastructure to find alternative ways of using resources sustainably. One of the tools that UN Environment developed to address issues in cities challenged by data scarcity is spatial microsimulation urban metabolism (SMUM) tool. It combines two powerful approaches: spatial microsimulation and urban metabolism. The model to impact a policy around any number of resources, including water, electricity, construction materials, food, waste, and others. The system can be fully adapted to suit the local requirements and policy priorities. Using SMUM, a synthetic population may be constructed for a city system. It can allocate consumption values to the individual groups, allowing cities, includes those in the data scarce environment, to monitor the distribution of resources, like how the place is going to look like, how much of inputs it needed, how much of output it will generate, and all of that. You can just simulate, you can understand it in that way, and it can show you a tentative like a picture. Yeah, it can be used to build that tool to simulate the potential impact and a policy change that can help manage that resource flow, right? So it's an interesting and useful tool. Maybe you can look for it separately. Yeah, linkages between CPI, City Prosperity Initiative, this is the CPI, and SDG 11 targets. So these are the CPI sets, CPI sub-dimension and CPI dimensions. So dimensions: productivity, infrastructure, quality of life, equity and inclusion, environmental sustainability, governance, and legislation. In that also you can see these sub-dimensions: local economic development, employment, municipal finance, etc., etc. And yeah, so you can see 11 targets are here, 11 targets. 11.1, it is linked to infrastructure. So sub-dimension 4, 5, and 6 are related to 11.1, and similarly 11.2 is connected to urban mobility here in infrastructure, right? 11.3 is connected to urban land, that is inclusive and sustainable urbanization, right? And so on. So it's an interesting like a mix, what is there in this tool and what do you need for accessing the city's prosperity initiative. Okay, and urban based targets from other SDGs, you can see those are also linked over here: 8, 9, 3, 6, 17, 15, 16, 1, 5, 8, 10, 3, 6, 7, 12, 9, 16, 17, etc. Okay, so overall it gives you a comprehensive interconnection and linkages between a goal 11 targets, overall targets from all SDGs, and the parameters of CPI. This will be helpful for your projects or assignments, or maybe your further research and studies. So let's see some interesting facts. Slum improvement, the proportion of the global urban population living in slums declined by 20% between 2000 to 2014. So there was some a decrease with the a persistent and constant help from agencies towards creating a decent living spaces, living buildings. Okay, so some improvement, that means it can be done. Even in the Indian cities also you may be seeing some positive changes. So what do we mean by affordable housing? Because like one of the targets it is mentioned in the first one itself, okay, how to provide like affordable housing to everyone so that there are no slums. That is the ultimate target. So for no slums you need affordable housing. Okay, so how do you define affordable housing? I think that is given over here. So first understand what is a slum. Okay, so this is the criteria for defining slums, informal settlements and inadequate housing. So slums, if there is no access to water, no access to sanitation, or no sufficient living area, overcrowding, if no structural quality, durability or like a location, and if no security of tenure or living, okay, if all of these are there, that's a slum. Okay, and how do you call it informal settlements? If these four are like a kind of like a if you are able to check them, like access to water, access to sanitation, structural quality and tenure, right? So only minus sufficient living area, okay, that like a becomes like an informal like a settlement. And yeah, here in inadequate housing, okay, if all of these like are problematic or not getting solved, okay, that is inadequate housing, not fit for living, of course, right? So no affordability, no accessibility, no cultural adequacy, along with all of this, okay, it's totally inadequate housing. Okay, so affordable housing is generally defined as that which is adequate in quality and location and is not so expensive that it prohibits its occupants from meeting other basic living costs or threatens their enjoyment of basic human rights. That is an affordable housing. So this is the definition of affordability in the housing, right? Housing affordability is affected by many factors including capital variables such as land, infrastructure and building materials, and occupational variables such as land leases, service cost, interest rates, etc. However, when it comes to measuring affordability, there are three common measures which fall into two components: housing costs and household income. These measures are house price to income ratio, which is calculated by dividing the median house price by median household income. This measure shows the number of annual median salaries it takes to buy a median priced house. Countries with high land prices and construction costs tend to have high house price to income ratio, but also low income countries with high housing market distortions. So what is your affordability and what is the cost of a how of kind of like a living like a unit? Okay, so that is this like a median to median, it is like a correlationship. Okay, so it is getting actually established to like a define this affordability. The second measure under this category is calculated by dividing the median annual rent by median annual renter household income. Okay, so this was in the ownership, this is in the renting. The World Bank and UN Habitat have defined a cutoff point at which owner occupied or rental housing is deemed unaffordable, which has been used for tracking housing affordability over time as part of the agency's Urban Indicators program. Housing is generally deemed affordable when a household spends less than 30% of their income on housing related expenses. Okay, so if you are earning X, okay, 30% of X, maximum should go towards your like a habitation like a costs. Okay, if it is going above this, then there are issues such as mortgage repayments, rent payments, direct operational expenses, taxes, insurances, service payments. So that is that like a bar, that is that threshold like a given. This is from UN Habitat actually, right? So yeah, proportion of urban population living in slums by sub-region. I think we have seen it before, but yeah, one more time. Northern Africa. Okay, so if you see this, this represents the like a years, and everywhere it's a good thing to see that it is declining. Okay, with exception to Western Asia, like Middle East countries, right? Gulf countries. There, like this has gradually actually is going up. It looks like like that. Rest everywhere it is falling down. So the population living in slums is slowly declining in an overall this thing. Overall world's average is not given over here. Direct economic loss in housing damage by hazard, type in percentage. So yeah, like hazards like a natural disasters and things. So you can see the highest is for by like a floods, 41.56%, close to 42%, housing damages is caused by flooding. And then second highest is by earthquakes and other geographical hazards, almost a quarter. Heavy rains. Okay, so the flooding and heavy rains, if you just see, they are like a two different categories, types given over here. Okay, so heavy rains actually cause 15.63 percentage damages. Storms are almost 14%. Then landslides, fires and others in small ratios, 1-2% under that. Okay, so the major cause of concern is actually water related, either in the form of a flood or in the heavy rain, and then comes the earthquakes. So these are the 2-3 like a major like a types which are posing like a challenges, with the fourth one, storm, at 14%. Solid waste in cities, well, another kind of like a not so properly addressed, if I don't call it neglected, but not so actually efficiently managed also, right? So many of the big cities, if you see, there are like a new hills have come up in those cities, like a New Delhi or Bombay, right? If you see, what are those hills? Those are actually like a heaps of like a waste which has getting accumulated over time. It was not just lying on the on the ground itself. Previously also the land was dug up to fill the waste. It got finally filled up, and now it is rising like like a hill. Okay, so there are several, I think in Delhi, as far as I know, there are 3 locations where like a such like a sites have come up in the recent decade, and in the Bombay also there are like a few places and many other cities. So in a nutshell, if you see, the effort should be to avoid like these, right? So there are no such, because there is no end to it. You keep on adding, you keep on adding, you keep on adding, and you keep on adding like numbers also. Maybe currently there are 3 locations, you go for 4 location, 5th location, 6th location, so there is no end to it, right? So there must come an end to it, that there is like a zero of like a such like a sites. Okay, 50% of global waste from high income countries comes. So you see how much like they consume and how much they create waste. Okay, solid waste management crucial for protecting the local and global environments. High income countries account for about half of the global waste generated. In low income countries, waste collection is below 50%. So the rest of the 50% goes to informal like a disposal also, like rivers, lakes, and just like anywhere, any piece of land you find free, right, and all of that. Okay, on air quality, 97% developing countries cities not meeting air quality standards. Only 3% are kind of in okay, like a zone, such a like a dangerous level. 49% developed countries cities not meeting air quality index. So half, close to half, so close to 50%. So it's a very severe like a situation like right now. Majority of the year, if you check any of like these like sites who actually keep track of like air quality. Okay, you will mostly see like a bad air quality index prevailing in the cities and towns. Okay, and it is really alarming. If this is the percentage, definitely it is alarming. What can be more alarming than this? Okay, it's almost reaching like 100%. Timely and inclusive action by public authorities based on a multi-sectoral approach is required to address air quality in rapidly industrializing countries with large urban populations. Air quality is worse in developing countries than in developed countries, and 7% of cities in developing countries do not meet air quality standards. Death rate from ambient PM 2.5 air pollution in 2015 per 1 lakh people. You see, this is the report, like a source from this like a link, State of Global Air Report 2017. Maybe you can refer for latest data. So yeah, here CO2 LLDC 91, LDC 88, developed regions 33, developing regions 67, SIDS 43, and here we have PM 2.5 concentration per region in 2.5, region specific Australia and New Zealand with the least at 6, to the highest from Western Asia and Northern Africa. Okay, that Middle East that region is the highest, is the worst one, 2.5 like a concentration, if you see micrograms per meter per cubic meter, 49 to 48 in Central and Southern Asia, and then 34 Sub-Saharan Africa, 27 in Eastern and Southern Asia, 20 in Latin America and Caribbean, then we have North America and Europe at 16, then we have Oceania, and then 6 being Australia and New Zealand. Okay, so this is this distribution. Yeah, and even like public spaces and open spaces, free spaces are also reducing since the density is increasing. Okay, so one of them like a major concern, where is the breathable like a space, some breathing space, some open space where one can go and sit comfortably, and there will be some good percentage of maybe trees, grasslands, like an open space, those are the lungs you can call of the city. That is also reducing. Okay, national urban policies, NUPs. Since Habitat 3, there is a 1/3 increase in countries with national urban policies. Up to 180 countries are implementing NUPs. The spatial structure and economic development of cities are the most prominent components of these NUPs. So, what is this process of NUP? You can see from here, participation to capacity development to acupuncture projects, then again participation, then again capacity building, and like that. So, it is a cyclic like a process, and in this there are these are the steps, diagnosis, formulation, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, feasibility, etc. Okay. So, it gives an interesting and unique platform to sit and discuss and derive. This is from UN Habitat. Yeah, countries supported by UN Habitat and NUPs, like a policies you can see over here. Majority of the countries, from global south, these are part of, these NUPs. So, a lot, from Africa, many from southern, Americas, some from Central Americas, and then South Asia, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Vietnam, etc. And then a few from Europe, only 2 I see, Sweden and Serbia. Levels of attention given to selected themes in NUPs in the formulation stage or beyond global scale. So, yeah, extensive, moderate, low, insufficient. So, extensive, if you see, is given for economic development, spatial structure, human development, climate resilience. I think the focus is more on like a low, and on this side 56 like a percentage, right. So, this is this distribution. Status of NUPs. So, you can see the legend over here: feasibility, diagnosis, formulation, implementation, monitoring. Okay. So, mostly I see implementation is on the higher like a scale, 16, 16. Only here Arab states it is very less. I think all are at very low level, and Northern Europe, America and Europe also it is high, 20 and 13 over here. Yeah, coming down to buildings. So, construction and use of local materials, like one of the features we discussed from system strategies for sustainable design. Local materials provide efficient ways for energy conservation and protection from disasters. In developing economies, between 7 and 10% of labor force are involved in residential construction. Yeah. So, innovation, being one of the like a major destructive potentials, right. So, such like initiatives should come up like more and more, because if we keep on moving at the same gradual like a pace, it's very slow and steady, right. We need the same exponential like intervention like rates also to bring in big changes. Placing housing at the center. Housing can play a central role because it's one of the like biggest consumers and emitters right? So it carries the largest potential also. Yeah, and yeah, like you may be aware, India has started like more than 100 smart city like projects. Okay, and these smart city projects are driven by technology, right? So in any and all of those fields of like a smart city, maybe you can search for this separately. What are the features of smart city? So most of them you will find are like coming through like a technology. That's why like this name, this smart, it comes from technology, like a utilization, right? So not just transportation, many other things. Yeah, and yeah, not forgetting the culture. Even with this fast pace of growth and development, okay, one should not forget like their like a culture, like the culture of this land, culture of this place, which is coming down from last thousands of years. That is very essential for your own identity, the identity of like the people, the communities, right? And we must work for like preserving like that culture and heritage also, which has been like a part of like this as in like a native like identity, right? Waste management makes economic sense. Yeah, how to manage our waste, we saw like how like a landfills and like a huge like a production of waste is happening. Okay, so yeah, managing this thing, improvement in data collection mechanisms. Yeah, so if we work towards like a capturing this like a real time data, we'll be able to like tackle it. Yeah, public spaces we discussed are the like heart of the cities. Like any like a cities open spaces, free spaces, if you remember, if you have been, a lot of people actually gather like that in the free time in the evenings or on the Sundays, and they enjoy, right? So those are like breathable spaces where you can go for relaxing yourself. So it has not just like a direct like a physical benefits such as fresh air and water and all, but it has psychological relieving like abilities also. Overall, maintaining security and safety, strengthening local and global partnerships, so not sitting in isolation, but like engaging ourselves with different organization for different like work abilities and exchanges. So finally we have come to the last slide. So some challenges and solutions listed by UN environment. So we saw the very rapid like a urbanization and often unplanned urbanization is getting witnessed worldwide, that led to increased pressure on the environment, right? So what can be done? Very simple: promote sound urban planning. So controlled planning, like a managed planning is the, I think, way to deal with the like this menace. Okay, going for sustainable buildings, low cost transportation system, green spaces, sustainable lifestyles. Secondly, our cities account for up to 80% of energy consumption as well as 75% of global waste. Okay, so definitely wherever the problem you fix that problem, I think it will give you the solution, right? So directly invest in renewable energy, waste management, sustainable and green infrastructure, so that like these things are taken care of. Due to high concentration of people, infrastructure, housing, and economic activity, cities are particularly vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. So the more concentration and more haphazard development, the more chances of getting it like impacted in any risk or disaster wala scenarios, right? So protecting cities which are important for social, cultural, economic benefits from environmental and climate threats, and planning and going for disaster risk like a reduction, resilience and all of those things, so that it can be taken as that the city has its own capacity to deal with any or all of like eventualities which might happen, right, in a collective and wholesome manner. So we saw under like a SDG 11, there are like a huge number of like things and tasks to handle, and this is one of the like a futuristic like target areas also of cities, since cities are growing everywhere, right? So wholesome and attentive like efforts are needed to deal with this. Okay, so with this we have come to the end of like this module. So thank you all for joining. See you in the next one.